At my dad's funeral, my golden girl sister tried to mock me after marrying my boyfriend. But when my husband showed up, their faces turned pale. The next morning, I woke up with 56 missed calls from my mom. Hello. Thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Dion Arnold from Atlanta. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's dive into the details of today's story. I grew up in a house where I was a ghost. Not the kind that haunts, but the kind nobody sees. My sister, Claire, was the sun, and I was the shadow trailing behind her, always there but never noticed. I remember the day she starred in the school play when we were kids. I was 10, she was 8, and she forgot half her lines, stumbling through the dialogue like she was reading a grocery list. But Mom and Dad clapped like she'd won an Oscar. Our little star. Mom gushed, her eyes glowing with pride. I sat there in the auditorium, clutching my science fair trophy, first place for a solar-powered car I'd built from scratch. My hands were sweaty, my heart pounding, waiting for them to turn to me, to say, "Ellie, we're proud of you." But they didn't. Dad just ruffled Claire's hair and said, "You're gonna be something special, kiddo." I wanted to scream, "What about me?" But I didn't. I never did. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the trophy cold against my chest. The house was quiet, but my head was loud. Why didn't they see me? Was I not enough? I heard Claire giggling downstairs, Mom's voice soft and warm, telling her how beautiful she looked on stage. I pressed my face into the pillow, trying to block it out, but the ache stayed. It always did. Fast forward to my early 20s. I was dating Mark, my first real boyfriend. He had this quiet laugh that made my chest feel warm, like I'd swallowed sunlight. He wasn't perfect. He forgot my birthday once, and he was terrible at texting back, but he saw me. Or so I thought. I brought him to a family dinner, hoping Mom and Dad would finally approve of something in my life. The dining room smelled like roasted chicken and garlic, the table set with Mom's fancy plates, the ones she only used for special occasions. Claire sat across from me, her golden hair catching the light, her smile sharp like a blade. Mark sat next to me, his knee brushing mine, and I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was it. Maybe someone finally saw me. But Claire had other plans. She leaned across the table, her laugh too loud, too bright, like she was performing for an audience. "Mark, you're so funny," she said, her eyes locking on his. I saw it, the spark. His cheeks flushed, and he laughed, a little too eagerly. My stomach twisted, a cold knot forming. I watched her, the way she flicked her hair, the way she leaned closer, her voice dripping with honey. She was doing it on purpose. She always did. Later, I found her giggling by the kitchen sink, her hand brushing his arm. The faucet dripped, a steady plop-plop that matched the pounding in my chest. "Claire, what are you doing?" I hissed, my voice low so Mom and Dad wouldn't hear. She smirked, flicking her hair again, like she was in a shampoo commercial. "Relax, Ellie. I'm just being friendly. Don't be so paranoid." Her words were sweet, but her eyes were cold, like she was daring me to fight back. I wanted to grab her, shake her, make her see how much it hurt. But I didn't. I just stood there, my hands clenched, the drip of the faucet echoing in my ears. I went to Mom, hoping she'd see it, hoping she'd care. "Mom, Claire's flirting with Mark." "It's not okay," I said, my voice trembling. She sighed, like I was a child whining about a toy. "Ellie, don't make a fuss. Claire's just having fun. You're overreacting." She turned back to the dishes, her hands scrubbing a plate, the water splashing. Dad didn't even look up from his newspaper, the pages rustling like he was brushing me off. I stood there, waiting for them to turn to me, to hug me, to say, "Ellie, we see you." But they didn't. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The house felt like a cage, and I was trapped in Claire's golden glow. The walls seemed to close in, the air thick with the smell of Mom's lavender candles, the sound of Claire's laughter echoing from downstairs. I thought about Mark, about the way he'd looked at her, about the way Mom and Dad looked at me, like I was nothing. I pressed my hands to my chest, trying to hold myself together, but the ache was too big. I didn't know it then, but the bars were about to snap. Something had to give. and soon it would. Mark left me on a rainy Tuesday. I remember the sound of the rain tapping against the window, like it was mocking me, a steady tap 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 that wouldn't stop. He stood in my apartment, his hands stuffed in his pockets, his eyes darting around like he couldn't look at me. "Ellie, I'm sorry," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "It's Claire. She's different. Exciting." My throat burned, a sharp, hot ache, but I didn't cry. Not in front of him. I stared at him, at the man who'd laughed with me, held my hand, promised me forever. "You're choosing her?" I whispered, my voice cracking. He nodded, his eyes finally meeting mine, and I saw it. Guilt, but not enough. Not enough to stay. And just like that, he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him, the rain swallowing his footsteps. I sat there, staring at the empty space where he'd stood, the room suddenly too big, too quiet. The rain kept tapping, and I felt it in my chest, like my heart was breaking in rhythm. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make the pain stop. But I just sat there, my hands trembling, my breath shallow. I thought about Claire, about her smirk, her golden hair, the way she'd stolen him like he was a trophy. And I thought about Mom and Dad, about how they'd let her. I ran to them that night, desperate for someone to care. The drive to their house was a blur, the rain streaking across my windshield, the wipers squeaking. I burst through the door, my hair wet, my eyes wild. "Mark left me for Claire," I said, my voice shaking, my chest heaving. Mom frowned, but not at Claire. At me. "Ellie, Claire deserves happiness," she said, her voice sharp, like I was the problem. "Mark chose her. You'll find someone else." Dad just grunted, flipping the TV channel, the sound of a laugh track filling the room. I stood there, waiting for them to see me, to hug me, to say, "You're enough." But they didn't. Mom turned back to her knitting, the needles clicking, and Dad stared at the screen, his face blank. I felt like I was drowning, the air thick, my lungs tight. That's when I knew I had to leave. I packed a suitcase that night, my hands shaking as I stuffed clothes, a few books, my old camera into the bag. The house was quiet, the rain still tapping, and I felt like a thief, sneaking out of my own life. I left a note on the kitchen table, my handwriting messy. "I'm gone. Don't call." I drove to the city, the headlights cutting through the dark, the rain smearing the world outside. My apartment was tiny, the walls thin, the floor creaky, but it was mine. I got a job at a diner, spilling coffee on my apron every shift, the smell of grease clinging to my hair. The customers were rude, the tips were bad, but I didn't care. I was free. I started therapy too. My therapist, Linda, had this soft voice that made me feel safe, like I could breathe again. "Ellie," she said, "you're not invisible. You're just learning to see yourself." I didn't believe her at first, but I wanted to. We talked about Mom, about Dad, about Claire, about the cage I'd lived in. "You're allowed to be angry," Linda said, her eyes kind. "You're allowed to feel." And I did. I felt everything: anger, hurt, fear, but also hope. One night, I picked up my camera again. It was dusty, the lens smudged, but it felt good in my hands, solid. I snapped a photo of the city skyline from my window, all jagged and bright, the lights blurring in the rain. It felt good, like I was capturing something nobody else saw. I started taking more photos: cracked sidewalks, stray cats, the diner's flickering neon sign. Each shot was a piece of me, a piece I'd lost in Claire's shadow. I didn't know it then, but that camera would change everything. Meanwhile, Claire was marrying Mark. I saw the wedding photos online, her in a white dress, Mom and Dad beaming, the church decorated with flowers. My chest ached, a sharp, hollow pain, but I didn't call. I didn't go. I scrolled past the photos, my finger trembling, and closed the app. I was done being their ghost. I was done letting Claire win. But the ache stayed, and I knew it would for a while. I didn't know it then, but the rain was just the beginning. The storm was coming, and I'd have to weather it alone. Years passed, and I started to breathe again. The city was loud, the streets crowded, but it felt alive, like I was part of something bigger. I enrolled in night classes, juggling textbooks and diner shifts, my eyes burning from lack of sleep. The classroom smelled like chalk and coffee, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. I earned a business degree, and with every grade, I felt a little stronger, like I was building a wall between me and the past. My professors were tough, but fair, and one of them, Ms. Carter, pulled me aside after class one night. "Ellie," she said, her voice firm, "you've got potential. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I nodded, my throat tight, and for the first time, I believed it. I opened a photography studio in the city, just a small room with exposed brick walls and a creaky door. The rent was high, but I didn't care. It was mine. I hung my photos on the walls, cracked mirrors, city shadows, stray dogs, and waited for clients. My first was a nervous bride, Emily, who wanted candid shots for her wedding. She fidgeted with her veil, her eyes wide. "I just want to look real," she said, her voice shaky. I smiled. "You already are." I caught her laughing, her eyes sparkling, and when she saw the photos, she cried. "You made me look beautiful," she said, hugging me. I smiled. "You already were." That moment stayed with me, like a light flickering on in the dark. That's when I met Daniel. He walked into my exhibition one evening, his tie loose, his eyes curious. The gallery was quiet, the air thick with the smell of wine and perfume. He stopped at a photo I'd taken, a cracked mirror reflecting the sky, the edges sharp, the light soft. "This is incredible," he said, his voice low, like he was talking to himself. "It's like you found beauty in the broken." I blushed, not used to compliments, my cheeks hot. "Thanks," I mumbled, tucking my hair behind my ear. We talked for hours, about art, about life, about the city. When he asked me out, I said yes, my heart pounding. Daniel was different. He listened, his eyes steady, his voice calm. We went for coffee, the cafe warm and cozy, the smell of cinnamon filling the air. I told him about my family, about Claire, about the cage I'd escaped. He didn't judge. "You don't owe them anything," he said, his hand brushing mine. "But you owe yourself everything." His words stayed with me, like a lifeline. We started dating, and he became my rock, my safe place. He'd show up at the studio with takeout, his smile warm, and we'd eat on the floor, laughing about nothing. I felt seen, for the first time in years. Meanwhile, Claire's life was everywhere. Instagram posts of her and Mark, Mom's voice on the phone gushing about their perfect marriage. I called home sometimes, just to check in, but it was always the same. "Claire's doing so well," Mom said, her voice bright. "She's so happy. They're thinking of buying a house." I wanted to scream, "What about me?" But I didn't. Instead, I hung up, the phone heavy in my hand, and went back to my camera, capturing shadows and light, broken things made whole. I took photos of the diner at dawn, the neon sign flickering, the city waking up. Each shot was a piece of me, a piece I was reclaiming. Daniel noticed, too. "You're different when you shoot," he said one night, watching me edit photos on my laptop, the screen glowing in the dark. "You're free." I smiled, my chest warm. "I feel free," I said, and I meant it. But the past wasn't gone. It lingered, like a shadow I couldn't shake. I saw Claire's posts, her perfect smile, her perfect life, and it hurt. I saw Mom's comments, her heart emojis, her pride, and it stung. But I didn't let it win. I kept shooting, kept building, kept breathing. One night, Daniel took me to a rooftop, the city sprawling below us, the lights twinkling like stars. He kissed me, his lips soft, and I felt it, a spark, a warmth, a future. "I love you," he said, his voice steady. I froze, my heart racing. "I love you, too," I whispered, and I meant it. But the fear was there, too, the fear of losing him, of being invisible again. I didn't know it then, but the light was about to find me. And the shadows? They were about to grow darker. Claire's perfect life wasn't so perfect anymore. I didn't want to care, but I did. Lydia, my cousin, called me one night, her voice tight, like she was holding something back. "Ellie, I need to tell you something," she said, the phone crackling. "Claire's been talking about you, saying you abandoned the family. It's not true, but Aunt Margaret and Uncle Robert believe her." I sighed, leaning against the kitchen counter, the smell of coffee lingering in the air. "Let them," I said, my voice flat. "I'm done." But Lydia wasn't. "She's not okay, Ellie. Her marriage is falling apart. Mark's miserable at work, and Claire's, well, she's Claire." I listened, my chest tight, as Lydia told me more. Mark was stuck in a dead-end job at some tech company, always complaining, his ambition fading. Claire was bored, snapping at everyone, her charm slipping like a mask. She's mean now, Lydia said, her voice low. She yells at waiters, rolls her eyes at Mom. It's like she's angry at the world. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I knew that Claire, the one who'd always gotten everything, the one who'd stolen Mark like he was a prize. But now, the prize was tarnished, and she didn't know how to fix it. Mom and Dad still worshipped her, of course. Lydia told me how they'd brag about her at family gatherings, their voices loud, their smiles wide. Claire's so successful, Mom would say, her eyes shining. She's got it all. But Lydia saw the cracks. They're blind, she said, her voice sharp. They don't see her, and they never saw you. I felt a pang, but not for Claire. For me. For the girl I used to be. The one who'd begged for their love, their attention, their pride. I thought about the science fair trophy, the dinners, the nights I'd cried myself to sleep. I thought about Mark, about the rain, about the note I'd left. And I realized I wasn't that girl anymore. Lydia and I talked more after that. She had her own struggles. Her parents pushed her to be perfect, too. Always comparing her to Claire, always telling her to try harder. We're the invisible ones, she said, laughing, but it wasn't funny. It was sad, and it made me realize I wasn't alone. Lydia was my ally, my family, in a way Mom and Dad never were. We'd meet for coffee, the cafe warm and cozy, the smell of muffins filling the air. She'd tell me about her job, her dreams, her fears. I want to leave too, she said one day, her voice soft. But I'm scared. I took her hand, my grip firm. You can do it, I said. You're stronger than you think. Meanwhile, Claire's life kept unraveling. Lydia told me how Mark would come home late, his tie loose, his eyes tired. He's drinking more, she said, her voice low. And Claire's spending money they don't have, designer bags, spa days, trips. I nodded, picturing it, Claire in her perfect dresses, her perfect hair, her perfect smile, but underneath, the cracks. I didn't want to care, but I did. Not for her, but for the girl I'd been, the one who'd lost everything to her. Daniel noticed, too. You're quiet, he said one night, sitting next to me on the couch, the TV flickering in the dark. What's wrong? I sighed, leaning against him, his arm warm around me. Lydia told me about Claire, I said, my voice low. Her life's falling apart. He nodded, his eyes steady. And how do you feel? I thought about it, the question hanging in the air. I don't know, I said. Angry, sad, relieved. He kissed my forehead, his lips soft. You don't have to feel anything, he said. You don't owe her that. And he was right. I didn't. But the past wasn't gone. It lingered, like a shadow I couldn't shake. I saw Claire's posts, her perfect smile, her perfect life, and it hurt. I saw Mom's comments, her heart emojis, her pride, and it stung. But I didn't let it win. I kept shooting, kept building, kept breathing. I took photos of the city at night, the streets empty, the lights glowing. Each shot was a piece of me, a piece I was reclaiming. I didn't know it then, but I'd need that strength soon, because Dad was about to die, and everything was about to change. Dad's death hit me like a punch. Lydia called me one night, her voice shaky, the phone crackling. Ellie, Uncle Robert's gone, she said, her words sharp, like glass. Heart attack. The funeral's next week. I sat there, staring at my camera on the coffee table, my hands trembling. The room was quiet, the air thick, and I felt it. The ache, the guilt, the anger. I hadn't seen Dad in years, hadn't talked to him beyond those cold, one-sided phone calls. And now he was gone, and I didn't know how to feel. Should I go? I asked Daniel, my voice low, my chest tight. He took my hand, his grip firm, his eyes steady. Not for them, he said. For you. For closure. I nodded, my throat burning. I didn't want to see them, but I needed to say goodbye. To Dad, to the girl I used to be. The drive to the funeral was long, the highway stretching ahead, the sky gray and heavy. Daniel drove, his hands steady on the wheel, the radio playing softly. I stared out the window, the trees blurring past, my mind racing. What would Mom say? What would Claire do? I thought about the dinners, the trophies, the nights I'd cried myself to sleep. I thought about Mark, about the rain, about the note I'd left. And I thought about Dad, about the man who'd never seen me, never cared. I felt the ache, but also the strength. I wasn't that girl anymore. I was stronger. I was enough. The funeral was quiet, the air thick with tension, the smell of lilies and incense filling the room. Mom sat in the front row, her face tight, her eyes red. She avoided my gaze, her lips pressed into a thin line. Claire stood by the casket, her golden hair still perfect, her dress black and elegant. She smirked when she saw me, her eyes sharp, like she was sizing me up. I felt it, the old ache, the old anger, but I pushed it down. I wasn't here for her. I was here for me. She walked over, her heels clicking on the floor, the sound sharp, like nails on a chalkboard. My husband drove me here, she said, her voice dripping with mockery, like she was winning some game I didn't want to play. He's such a sweet man. I looked at her, at the girl who'd stolen everything, and I smiled, calm, steady. Daniel, I called, my voice clear, come sit by me. Mark's face went pale when he saw Daniel. The room buzzed, whispers spreading like wildfire, the air crackling with tension. Daniel walked over, his suit crisp, his eyes steady. He shook Mark's hand, his grip firm, his voice low. Thanks for leaving Ellie, he said, his words sharp, like a blade. You left the best girl in the world for this. Claire's smirk vanished, her eyes wide, her lips trembling. Mom's eyes widened, her hands clutching her purse, her face pale. I looked at her, my voice quiet but sharp, like a knife. You always said Claire deserved happiness, I said, my words steady, my chest tight. I hope you're satisfied. The room was silent, the air heavy, the tension thick. I felt it, the power, the strength, the release. I'd said it, finally, after all these years. I'd said it, and they'd heard me. Daniel took my hand, his grip warm, his eyes steady. Let's go, he said, his voice soft. We walked out, the door clicking shut behind us, the silence deafening. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I'd said goodbye, to Dad, to the girl I used to be, to the cage I'd escaped. The drive home was quiet, the highway stretching ahead, the sky dark and heavy. Daniel drove, his hands steady, the radio playing softly. I stared out the window, the trees blurring past, my mind racing. I thought about Mom, about Claire, about the funeral. I thought about the girl I'd been, the one who'd begged for their love, their attention, their pride. And I thought about the woman I was now, the one who'd built a life, a career, a family. I felt the ache, but also the strength. I wasn't that girl anymore. I was stronger. I was enough. And I knew, deep down, that the storm was over. Mom called me the next day, and the day after that. Ellie, please, she said, her voice cracking, the phone trembling in my hand. I'm sorry. I was wrong. Forgive me. I listened, my chest tight, my throat burning. I wanted to feel sorry, to feel something, but I didn't. I felt tired, like I'd carried their weight for too long. Ask your golden girl, I said, my voice flat, my words sharp. She's all you ever cared about. I hung up, the phone heavy in my hand, the silence loud. It kept ringing, the sound sharp, like a knife, but I didn't answer. I couldn't. Lydia called me later, her voice low, her words careful. Ellie, it's bad, she said, the phone crackling. Claire and Mark are falling apart. Mark's bitter, humiliated by Daniel's words. He's drinking more, coming home late, snapping at everyone. I nodded, picturing it, Mark in his suit, his tie loose, his eyes tired, his ambition fading. And Claire? I asked, my voice low. She's desperate, Lydia said, her words sharp. She's spending money they don't have, buying designer bags, spa days, trips. She's trying to keep up the perfect life, but it's crumbling. I listened, my chest tight, my mind racing. I didn't want to care, but I did. Not for her, but for me, for the girl I'd been, the one who'd lost everything to her. Lydia told me more. Mom was alone now, her golden child too busy to care. She's realizing now, Lydia said, her voice low. She's seeing the cracks, the mess. But it's too late. I nodded, picturing it, Mom in her empty house, the silence loud, the walls closing in. I thought about the dinners, the trophies, the nights I'd cried myself to sleep. I thought about the science fair, about Mark, about the rain. And I realized I didn't owe her anything. I didn't owe Claire anything. I owed myself everything. Daniel noticed, too. "You're quiet," he said one night, sitting next to me on the couch, the TV flickering in the dark. "What's wrong?" I sighed, leaning against him, his arm warm around me. "Lydia told me about Claire," I said, my voice low. "Her life's falling apart, and Mom's begging for forgiveness." He nodded, his eyes steady. "And how do you feel?" I thought about it, the question hanging in the air. "I don't know," I said, my voice soft. "Angry, sad, relieved." He kissed my forehead, his lips soft. "You don't have to feel anything," he said, his voice steady. "You don't owe them that." And he was right. I didn't. I published my photography book that year. I called it Unseen, dedicated to those who were invisible but never gone. The launch was quiet, just me, Daniel, and a few friends, the gallery warm and cozy, the air thick with the smell of wine and perfume. I stood by the wall, my photos lining the room, cracked mirrors, city shadows, stray dogs. I looked at them, at the pieces of me, and I felt it, the strength, the pride, the release. Emily, the bride, came, her smile wide. "You did it," she said, hugging me. "You made it." I smiled, my chest warm. "I did," I said, and I meant it. Daniel and I started a foundation, too, with his help, support for young adults like me, kids from broken families. We met with social workers, lawyers, donors, the office bustling, the air thick with purpose. I told my story, my voice steady, my words clear. I was invisible, I said, my chest tight. But I'm not anymore. And they don't have to be, either. The room was quiet, the air heavy, and I felt it. The power, the strength, the release. My pain became purpose. And Claire? She was just an echo, fading in the distance, her golden glow dimming, her cracks showing. I didn't know it then, but the storm was over. I'd weathered it, and I'd come out stronger. I looked at Daniel, at Lydia, at the life I'd built, and I knew I was enough. I was always enough. Years later, a letter came. Mom's handwriting, shaky and thin, the envelope creased. I sat at the kitchen table, the light soft, the air quiet. "Ellie," it read, the words sharp, like glass. I was wrong. I favored Claire, and I lost you. I'm sorry. Please, forgive me. I read it once, my chest tight, my throat burning. I read it again, the words blurring, my hands trembling. I wanted to feel sorry, to feel something, but I didn't. I felt tired, like I'd carried their weight for too long. I set the letter down, the paper cold against my fingers, and I didn't cry. I didn't call. Forgiveness doesn't always mean fixing things. Sometimes it means letting go. And I did. I let her go. The gallery exhibition was that night. I stood by the wall, my photos lining the room, shadows, light, broken mirrors made whole. The air was thick with the smell of wine and perfume, the room buzzing with life. Daniel stood by me, his hand warm in mine, his smile steady. Lydia laughed with a client, her eyes bright, her voice warm. My chosen family, the ones who saw me. I stopped at a photo of myself as a child, a quiet, hopeful girl, sitting in the shadows, her eyes wide, her smile small. I looked at her, at the girl I'd been, and I smiled. "You're not invisible anymore," I whispered, my voice soft, my chest warm. I thought about the journey, about the pain, about the strength. I thought about the science fair, about Mark, about the ray. I thought about Claire, about Mom, about the cage I'd escaped. I thought about the diner, about the camera, about Daniel. I thought about the foundation, about the kids we'd helped, about the lives we'd changed. And I realized I'd stepped out of Claire's shadow, out of Mom's cage. I'd found my light, and it was mine, all mine. The room was quiet, the air heavy, and I felt it, the power, the strength, the release. I looked at Daniel, at Lydia, at the life I'd built, and I knew I was enough. I was always enough. And the storm? It was over. I'd weathered it, and I'd come out stronger. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, give it a thumbs up. It helps others find it too. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for more stories like this. Drop a comment with your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. See you in the next one.